Okay. Uh, so back to what I was talking about, the sort of promised land for marketers everywhere is having a reason to maintain a relationship with you. And they contrive all kinds of reasons. It's frankly what drives an awful lot of the whole e-marketing concept is that they can find you and they can force you to continue to engage with them because they keep track of you and they send you ads according to what you're researching and things like that. And in less covert ways, they, for instance, you buy a television from Samsung or from anyone, and as soon as you open the package, there's a what they call a warranty registration card, and it sounds as if you need to send this card in order for your warranty to be valid, which, as far as I can see, that isn't the truth. But they want you to send the card in because it's you're giving them permission to continue to keep in touch with you, and they want that. What's ironic with the building industry is that motivation for a client to continue to engage with you is sort of built in. People are buying something that's they expect so much out of, that they want such a long lifespan from, that they want the sense that you as the builder will continue to be there. They wouldn't mind, in many cases, the sense that you will continue to engage with them. They certainly would be reassured if you show some sign that you're prepared to come back and fix what's right. The point here is the building industry, by definition, has something that virtually every other industry craves. And the building industry, strangely enough, doesn't really make the most of that. And that is a willingness, let's say, on behalf of the client to maintain a relationship with you. You want to build that relationship, not just during the project, and if you can build a constructive one, the project goes more smoothly, but you want it to continue because, as I've said before, your satisfied client is one of the most powerful ways you have for generating additional business. So you would like them to be willing to continue to talk to you. You would like that relationship to be on a good basis. So what goes, we come back to often in this conversation is you want to cultivate your client. You want a satisfied client, someone who's delighted they did it with you, because you want them to continue to be in the dialogue going forward. You'd like, if somebody else is considering buying a house from you, you would love it if your former customers were willing to go to bat for you and say, yes, these people do a good job. So that's why we sort of bend over backwards or suggest that you kind of push the envelope in terms of doing things to make sure that your relationship stays intact. It doesn't mean that you have to bend over on everything. It doesn't mean you have to concede on anything that somebody says. You don't necessarily create an enemy just because you suggest that something they had a problem with is not your obligation to fix. But you have to be very careful about how you have that dialogue. And you want to be very careful about that term, see you in court or going legal. Once people talk about there being some form of a legal remedy, then the walls go up, the defenses go up. One of the reasons I suggest that you reference that prompt payment legislation in your contract up front is because if you bring that up after you started to work for these people, you're bringing in the whole legal thing. It comes out. If you tell me that the law says this, what you're basically telling me is see you in court, which means you might as well say go lawyer up because we're going to have a fight. You really don't want that message to get across. And there's a few things you need to be careful of. If you let things drift from let's find a solution together into more of a confrontation that says I'm right and you're wrong, then a lot of weird things happen. People tend to believe their memories are correct and they're not objective about it. I certainly know I do this. I guarantee this is ironclad fact. And even though you guarantee something else is an ironclad fact, it's hard to shift me off that position. Talk about no honor when there's a rush to the lifeboats. What I mean by that is You can have a very solid partnership. You can have a very solid relationship, but when it looks as if there's going to be a winner and a loser, nobody wants to be a loser. And you have to be careful when it then goes into some form of a formal legal proceeding, then the lawyers get involved. And quite often the insurance company gets involved. If it's something that you allow to become what may go against your liability insurance or your um, what do they call it? Anyway, if it looks like it's something where you might have to make an insurance claim, then the insurance company gets involved. And that's when that expression rush to the lifeboats begins, because the insurance company's obligation, that what they're concerned with is whether or not they have to cover your liability, and they will do whatever they can to make sure you aren't held liable. And that can get complicated. So an example I gave you, going back, this is a good example for a number of reasons. First of all, it illustrates what I said about the consequences when people won't do a simple check of the work that they did. We had a claim where it was a condominium. There had been a fire, which while there hadn't been much damage from the flames, there was a fair amount of smoke damage. The resident had to move out for a month or two while the place was cleaned up and repainted and things like that. The last piece of work that was being done, quite literally, this was a Friday afternoon and the owner was going to move in on Saturday. The last piece of work that was being done was one of our subcontractors was in laying vinyl strip flooring in the kitchen. So the fellow who was laying the floor, he lays his last piece, may have cleaned up. It's not a very messy job, so it probably just involved gathering up some paper and things like that. Gets up and leaves. If only he had stopped to evaluate his work. If he'd stood up and surveyed the kitchen with the flooring on it, he would have noticed that there had been a box, a cardboard box, that the vinyl strip flooring came and had been laid on the stove. And who knows how, but the stove had been turned on. It was on a low heat, but that guy leaves and the box is on there. The stove element heats up. It didn't really burst into flames as near as we could tell, but it smoked, and it put smoke throughout the place, which meant, of course, the resident couldn't move back in. So that involved getting a hold of the residents and explaining that to them. And this person was extremely reasonable. They said, I'm not at all happy, not surprising. They weren't spoiling for a fight. They just wanted an equitable solution. And what to them was an equitable solution was simply to not compel him to make a second insurance claim. 2 strikes and you're out sometimes. So if he'd had to make a second claim so close back to back, it would have put a bit of a warning flag on his file. It would have affected insurance. That's all he really wanted. He was prepared to stay out of the place for however long it took. Our subcontractor stepped up and said, yeah, quite clearly, it's my guy who did it. Then the rush for the lifeboats began when people called their respective insurance companies. All those insurance companies said, if you talk to anyone, your insurance will be void. So the worst of it was they told the subcontractor he can't have any conversation with anyone or they wouldn't cover him. And we were told if we talked to anyone, our insurance would be void. And here's the poor homeowner who's completely blameless in all this and asking for nothing more than for somebody to say that no, he wouldn't have to put in a second claim. That's all he wanted. But other parties were involved. Nobody wanted to talk to anybody. And that fellow sat there for about a week waiting for some kind of answer. Finally, the subcontractor said, I don't care what my insurance company says. If this is going to go completely down the tubes, I will pay for the repair if necessary. So he took the chance. So you need to be careful when there's more than you and one other person involved. You might think there's a perfectly reasonable middle ground. Be careful that, for instance, your subcontractor or a mortgage holder on the property, they can all step in and completely mess up the relationship that you might already have and things are going smoothly. Life can get complicated real fast. Be careful, as I said, be careful of that phrase, see you in court, and be careful that you don't frame everything in the context of, will this get me out of trouble if I go to court? By the time you get to court, you've lost, because you're never going to maintain a relationship with somebody once you've gone to court over it. And the fact is, being solid enough to win in court isn't necessarily what you need. What you need is to be able to demonstrate that, probably ideally, or at the very basis, what you need to demonstrate, if you've got a difference of opinion with your client, if your record keeping is better than theirs, if you have a better information, and this is all stuff, it doesn't happen by magic. You have to maintain it, you have to keep it. But if you have a better record keeping than the client, then you very probably will convince the client that what you say probably holds more water than what they say. They're not going to look ahead to some time in court. They're going to say, what would a reasonable person see here? Not everyone. Sometimes you push people to the point of where they think you've been unfair to them. They won't listen to reason. Some people just refuse to listen to reason. But very often the quality of your information is what's going to win a difference of opinion one way or another. Now, this is a time where I generally have to admit to, I wouldn't call it a character flaw, but I would call it a limitation of mine, me as an individual. One of the things that I talked about, I observed that chief executive officers that I've had some reason to engage with, one of the things they show as a quality that probably has something to do with their success is they're diligent about responding to messages. One of the other things that has impressed me, and I can't say I know this to be universal, but the people I've known well enough to get a read on this, what really impresses me is that they don't personalize any kind of debate, whether it's with employees or clients or anything like that. And sometimes people on the other side get quite heated and quite personal, and they can sometimes be deliberately insulting. And those people who I see as being good leaders, they just don't let it get under their skin. It probably does, but they've learned that your goal, what you're trying to achieve as a leader of your business, is to find a solution you can live with, a solution that is not going to alienate your client. And you won't find that. Once things get emotional, you probably won't find it. Now, I talked about my own shortcomings, and with me, the problem I have with a difference in opinion is I tend to approach these things as a debate, as this is an argument, and I come across as if I want to win that argument. I don't know whether, in fact, I'd like to think that I'm willing to compromise, but I know that the way I present those things is, you and I are going to have an argument. There's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. I don't do a very good job of saying, let's find the common ground that's good for both of us. And there's a fairly stark example in this. It's not very flattering for me, but it would be about 3 years ago. My in-laws have a cottage, which is a big rambling place, and it's got room for more than one family. So on this particular weekend, my wife and I were up there at the same time as her brother and perhaps one or two of his kids. Now, next door to them, there's some people who are very nice and very courteous, but they would let somebody else use their cottage that weekend, whether they were renting or just visiting, I don't know. But these people decided they were going to have a bonfire, and they weren't really that well versed on what to do. And they started the fire, and they were using wood that was very smoky. And the wind was blowing that smoke across our deck. Now, normal etiquette for people who are familiar with that sort of thing, think about where the smoke's going, and they try not to light a fire when it's blowing across the neighbor's property. So right out of the gate, I'm going, well, don't they know better? And we waited for the smoke to settle down, and after about half an hour, it didn't. So I decide it's time to go over and educate them, I suppose. So I'm going over there with a purpose of telling them, making sure they understood how unreasonable it was for them to be doing this, and that maybe they should consider stopping. I wasn't trying to start a fight, but I did want them to feel as if they had done something wrong. Wrong attitude entirely. That's not driven by a solution, because my goal wasn't to make them feel bad and to put a rift between the neighbors. My goal was to sit out on the deck without being bothered by smoke. Now, luckily, on my way over there, I saw my brother-in-law coming back the other way. Now, he runs a contracting business of his own, and he happens to have a lot of the qualities that I see in a leader. One of them is he doesn't get emotional. He doesn't try and win arguments. He's just looking for a solution. So as we're passing, I notice, oh, the smoke's gone, because it really was that noticeable. There was a cloud of it pouring over until that moment. And I realized, oh, the smoke's gone. So I looked at him. I said, what did you do? He said, I took him some some dry firewood. So think of the difference purely based on how two people approach that same incident. There's Steve, who wants to go over and win an argument, for want of a better phrase, win an argument against with the neighbors, make it clear to them that they were in the wrong. And then there's my brother-in-law, who simply just wants the smoke to go away, and everybody's happy. So if he hadn't got there before me, I probably would have gone over there, and the neighbors probably would have been uncomfortable. It might have spoiled their weekend, but at the very least, they would have probably thought, well, watch out for the next door neighbors. They're kind of grouchy. But instead, they're probably going, boy, those neighbors next door are nice, aren't they? They brought us this firewood, and now we have a nice cheery fire. And the only difference was, and what was your purpose in going over there? Win an argument or find a solution? And it's tough. It's tough for me, I admit that. And it can be tough for a lot of people. But leaders focus on solutions, and they don't get emotional. I guess the point here on this slide is to go down a couple of lines and talk about the different levels of conflict resolution. So if you can't sort it out for yourself, like I said, be careful of that phrase, see you in court. Court is the last place anyone wants to be. It's expensive, it takes forever, and especially if it's small claims court, you get so little time to present your case. It's anybody's guess what's going to come out at the other end. One thing you know is going to come out of a court case is there going to be a winner and a loser, and probably both sides will be mad at each other. But there are intermediate steps you can take. And sometimes people confuse the two or treat them as the same thing. Mediation and arbitration are not the same thing. They both involve a third party, what's supposed to be an objective third party. But mediation starts from the premise that the two people that are disagreeing believe there's room to meet in the middle. They just can't agree on where middle is. So while that's not always the case, a mediator, very often their role is to objectively say, it sounds to me like what is a fair settlement here is this. But they're looking for a settlement, and that settlement is usually somewhere between the two. Arbitration, on the other hand, is an argument. It says, I'm right, you're wrong, and the arbitrator very often is put in a position of having to pick a winner. One winner. Arbitration, very often you end up having to get legal counsel to do it, so it's more expensive. And by the time you've gone to the level of arbitration, at that point, you probably have lost your relationship with your client. If you win, they're pissed at you. If you lose, they're annoyed because you should have seen that coming and you shouldn't have dragged me through this. So you want to try and, whatever your differences are, try and keep them above the level of arbitration. Sort it out for yourselves if you can. Use a mediator rather than an arbitrator. And whatever you do, I don't know what it would take where it would be the right thing to go to court, but that's not where you want to go. To the extent that some people in qualifying the a company that they may or may not do business with, they simply research whether the company's been in court, not whether they lost or anything. They research if somebody's been in court. The fact that they let something get to court rather than find a way of settling it outside is enough to give you a black mark. So something to watch out for. And this is, again, where I probably am in conflict with lawyers, and you should be careful, as with everything, and the disclaimers in the binder, as with everything that you hear in these courses, this is not legal opinion. You will get, if you get different advice from your lawyer, then that's where the expert opinion comes from. But my concern sometimes is if you believe that you can protect yourself in contracts, then sometimes those contracts can build in terms that are aimed at defending you against the worst kind of villain. And maybe the best way to protect yourself against the worst kind of villain is to do a little research, get a read on whatever interactions you have before you get into a contract, and make a decision early and courageously about whether or not these people look like they're going to give you grief. Because, as I said earlier, you can't force a good relationship into place by your contract. You can defend, you can make a good relationship solid and durable with contracts. But if people are not prepared to cooperate and work together, the contract's not going to change that. You might put something in place that stops you from getting completely taken to the cleaners, but that doesn't mean that you're going to work well together. So my sense is, if you've been badly burned by a client who did something that isn't typical, then your best defense is to look for whatever it is that warned you that this was going to happen, and then stay away from it. One of the things that my personal opinion, since an example might help, my personal opinion is, if somebody wants a fixed price on a project, and then they turn around and tell you, now I want to see your expanded line item pricing, to me, that's a huge danger signal. If they either are satisfied that the price you offer gets them where they need to go, then you give them a scope that reassures them they're going to get what they expected. But showing them line item pricing doesn't give them anything more than they need. They still should be committing to paying you your fixed price. Now, what you're going to get, you're going to get. If you give somebody expanded line item pricing, you're going to get challenged. Because they went off to Home Depot and they saw cabinets for $8,000 and you've got $24,000 in there. Are you really going to be able to convince them of the difference? Well, partly not, because that $24,000 has a markup in it to reflect all the things that you do in order to put them in. It's not just the purchase price of the cabinets. And people aren't educated enough to know that. So somebody burned you. And that's precisely what I'm saying, I guess, is line item pricing is something I would not do. And so rather than try and build a contract around it that says, if I give you line item pricing, you will not challenge me on, so you're not going to win that. You will still get challenged. They will still pick you apart. So you need to decide, these are the terms under which I'm prepared to do business. And your best protection is to just not do business if those are the terms and if people want to go outside those terms. Trying to shift it around and write a contract that allows you to continue to do it, even though they don't want to do it that way, it's just going to lead to more conflict. So your best defense against a nasty customer is to spot a nasty customer and have the courage to not go there. Because a contract is not likely to protect you from a nasty customer. On top of which, you might be protected, but are they going to be somebody who's delighted they did it and delighted they did it with you? I sort of doubt it. I guess the only point I'm trying to make here is you need to be careful about, in spite of your best intentions, you need to be careful that the level of service you start out with is the level of service you finish with. Yeah, I hear it time and time and time again from both sides. I started out, I was taking phone calls from them at all hours of the day and night, thinking that I would be able to train them off that as time went by. And the customer, their point of view is, they started out, they would take my phone call whenever I did, and now they don't take my phone call. I guess they don't care about my business anymore. So what you think is trying to educate them to just common courtesy, they see as you withdrawing from them and offering them less than you did at the start. So as much as I understand, you want to start with a bang. You want to impress people with just how, yeah, I'll be with you in a minute, Zubair. As much as you might want to blow people away with how responsive you are at the outset, make sure that you can deliver that all the way through, because if you fall off, then they won't say, oh, you started as an 11 and now you went back to 10. All they will see is you're giving them less than you did to start with. So yes, Zubair, go ahead.
In the previous slide, it was the policy about the good clients, not the nasty ones. So okay. My question is like, what about the nasty ones?
Well, that was my point, is you need to develop the skills and the awareness so that you can, because frankly, a lot of people who are going to be a problem, they give it away pretty early in the process. They start squeezing you on price is everything. When you're getting to somebody where everything is all about price, and can you give me a more than, drop your price some more, drop your price some more, that's a warning sign. People who they want to give you a fixed price for the whole job, and then once they've got that, then they say, okay, now I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I want you to take money out of the job for that. That's a warning sign. People who can't make up their mind, these are warning signs. A contract's not going to protect you from those. Your only protection, unfortunately, is to be able to see them coming, develop the skills to identify who's going to be a problem, or better still, identify what characteristics make a good customer for you. These are the things these are the kind of customers I work well with, and have the resolve to hold out until you're talking to customers of those qualities.
But doesn't that reduce the market need? Like
it reduces, yes, it reduces the market. And like I said earlier, instead of you saying, okay, I'm giving up a potential piece of business, you need to think about it in a different way. And what's happening, if you choose to do business with someone you know is going to be a problem, they're going to tie you up for what, 6 months, 8 months? And while you're tied up with them, you're unavailable to do business with other people. So instead of you looking at it as, oh, I'm going to let this piece of business get away on me, you need to think about it as, this piece of business is going to prevent me from all the other things I could have done while they're making me bend over backwards. It's a very tough thing to do, but like I said earlier, the best contractors I come across, when I ask them, when did your business really start to succeed, is when they learn that skill. When they said, this is the kind of customer I can do the best job for, and so I am going to look for that kind of customer. And I believe it so much that when somebody simply cannot, and there's all kinds of middle ground. This is not a very clean line to split things, but be careful that don't knowingly get in business with a customer who's going to be a challenge, because it stops you from the opportunity to do business with better customers. And I used to have this argument strangely enough, I was the manager. Normally, the manager is the one who's out there telling the employees to go out and generate more business, generate more business. And I had 5 project managers, and I would be telling them from time to time, don't take this job. And they go, yeah, but it's a $600,000 job we got to take. I said, no, your life won't be worth living if you take this job. Now, normally it's the other way around, right? It's normally it should be the manager saying, go sell more. And it's the guy who's got to carry it out. But that's not the way it played out. It's because when you're that close, it's real hard to spot trouble coming, but you have to develop that skill. And you have to be prepared. It says, you know what? If I do this job, it's going to tie me up and I won't be able to do other better jobs. It's a very hard decision to make. And the only time you really feel the confidence to do that is if you have a process for bringing in new business. You're generating leads so that if I say no to this job, it's not like I go sit on the beach for 3 months. I say no to this job and, oh, here's another job that I've already had a conversation with, and I'll try and develop that one. And it doesn't happen overnight. But when you're getting yourself roped into those challenging jobs, think about how badly, what could I have done differently?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll add one more point to that. I've learned by hard way. There are clients where you have to draw the line too. I'm dealing with a client who consistently is asking one thing after other, and he keeps asking to be available to discuss all the time with this and that. And sometimes you have to take a hard stance and say, okay, this is all not part of the scope of the work, and we were only committed to whatever is in the scope of the work. And I learned that a bit hard way.
Yeah. And one thing that may help you sort of react to that as the project's going on, because you can't always spot those people and say no. Sometimes you're you've already started the project and it turns out, yeah, they're demanding that way. They were looking for changes. And the best defense you can have there is to have a very bulletproof change management system where you do not step outside the scope, either doing more or doing less until they sign a change order. And then you can structure that change order so that it reflects all the things that go along with it. And it may be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but let's take, for instance, a common thing where the customer says, okay, I know we've got a contract, but I think I can do the hardwood floors, so I'll just do the hardwood floors. And you ask yourself, well, okay, do I really want to start an ongoing battle about this? And you might say, okay, we'll allow you to do the hardwood floors and we'll take the cost of that out of the job. Well, first of all, make sure you have a very rigorous change process that states outright the scope no longer includes the hardwood floors. Because you're tearing, I talk about a statutory warranty. When I say statutory warranty, that means the warranty as it's defined in the law. And it isn't up to Tarion, it's already in the law. The statutory warranty says, if it's in the scope, then you are responsible for it. So if you agree with the buyer, okay, you're going to do the hardwood, then you have to have a change order that says the hardwood is no longer in the scope of work. You have to do something to formally take it out of the scope of work. Because the worst case scenario is the homeowner does a bad job of it, and then they put a claim into Tarion that says that the hardwood wasn't laid properly. And unfortunately, the way the rules are, you might still be forced to make it right. So step one is have a very solid change and rigorous change order process. But the other part that goes along with that is where there are changes, for example, the hardwood, then make sure that the homeowner incurs everything that goes along with that. So the homeowner says, I'll do the hardwood. Now, what they're thinking is, I'll get a truck to drop it off on Friday. I'll rent a nailer and I'll come in some Saturday and bang it down. No. If you want to do the hardwood, A, we're going to take it out of the scope through a change order. And B, not only is it your job to lay the hardwood, you got to do all the other things that I do as a contractor when it comes to hardwood. You got to do the material takeoff. You got to order it. You got to schedule delivery so it's here at the right time. You got to take it off the truck, because these are all the things that I have to absorb in my job. If you want the hardwood, you get the whole job. And by the way, you don't do it on some convenient Saturday. You have to do it at the time when I would have my subcontractor do it, which is probably sometime between when the walls are painted and when the baseboard goes down. We'll tell you when you're going to come and do it. Now, obviously, you can't be as blunt as I was just being, but you need to graciously let them know that there's probably a whole lot more to this than you realized. And so while you might be willing to let them have to do the hardwood, the message you want them to hear is, oh, that wasn't so easy after all. So maybe I won't push him on other things. Because if I say do the hardwood, the next thing is, you know what, I think I ought to go with the tile as well.
Steve, I think it's a no-go zone in my opinion. The reason being, yes, he can come on your time, install and whatnot, he can accommodate. But a big piece of puzzle is liability insurance. He shows up and does the work and gets injured.
Yes.
You are liable for that.
Yeah.
So for me, I'll be like, sorry, not part of the game.
I totally agree with you, Akram. I think, and a lot of contractors say, no, I simply don't do it because it's a minefield and I can't. So I do agree. That if you can get away with it, that's the right answer. But some people aren't prepared to. Some people just can't find it in themselves to say no. So I say, if you must say yes, then make it yes with all these other conditions. But I agree with you. I think the right answer is we signed an agreement that said this, and there's all kinds of reasons why that's got to stay that way.
Steve, whenever you're speaking, there's a small.
Yes, I've heard it too. Zubair, can you do me a favor? Would you mind muting your microphone?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That might be what it is. I don't know. Let me know if it continues. But I don't have an answer for it. I don't.
Sure, we'll find out. Yeah. No.
Okay. Okay, so stepping away from that unpleasant subject of conflict now, let's look at, and I think I've already talked this one pretty much to death. Your customer satisfaction is not something you do as a function that stands out there somewhere in a place all its own. It is central to how you do business. It is fundamental to generating new business for you. And as I said earlier, in the construction industry, there's a built-in reason why clients should want to continue to be in touch with you. It's good for them in terms of it making sure that the home they buy continues to perform as it should. And it's good for you from the standpoint of maybe they're available to encourage other people to shop from you, to buy from you. And you're not going to get any referral business if you don't have any satisfied customers. So you need to do what you can to deliver that. Now, in another course, in the general management course, we spend a lot of time about how are you going to set yourself apart. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was. They've already said that builders commonly say their quality of service and the quality of their build is their distinguishing thing. Well, that may or may not be true, but just because you say it doesn't mean anyone's going to believe it. If you want to say we stand apart by the basis of our quality of service, then you need other people who will say it. Because guess what? Every other builder on the planet is saying that as well. Why would I believe you? Well, because I really, really, really mean it. The other guys only sort of mean it. That doesn't work. Why would I believe you? Well, because not only do I say it, but the last 5 homes that I built, those people are prepared to tell you the same thing. how can they do that for you if you don't maintain a relationship? What's the likelihood they will do that for you if they didn't really have that good an experience? Pretty much zero. So your business lives or dies on whether you are continually turning over new satisfied customers. It has to be fundamental to the way you do things. And in a sort of unfortunate nature of that is it can't depend entirely on you. You have to get everybody who works for you to participate in making that difference. So now you've got to work towards getting an organization that is oriented to making people satisfied. You want everybody who works for you, both subcontractors and your own employees, to see your expectations a cut above what they do, what they might do for other people. You've got subcontractors who work for numerous other people. How do you make them participate in your efforts for customer satisfaction? Well, maybe you take the effort to introduce them by name to the buyers when they're on the job site. You know, if you're going to, you know, one thing you must do is make sure buyers, one of those maybe less than pleasant conditions that you have to introduce before you sign a contract, customer access to the job site has to be under your control. They can't just show up when they want. They can't come on Saturday and start putting in things of their own. You have to accompany them. They have to agree to that. Well, if you're going to that step, then maybe you take the trouble of introducing them by name to whatever subs are on the job site. Convey to the point there is you want your subs to realize that they're part of the team, that they're contributing. We will get into some other things in a minute about how you involve everybody in the crew, whether they're your employees or not. But one of the things you need to be prepared for, and I think I might have given this to you already, but I'll say it again, advances in customer satisfaction rarely happen from one big event. It's many modest changes. And what makes that more challenging still is most of it's behavior change. Most of it is changing people's habits. That one habit I keep referring to, step back and review your work. Just because somebody's a subcontractor for you doesn't mean you can't reinforce on them. Please step back, have a look at your work. You won't have to bug them to do it too often before one day they step back and they discover, oh, look at that. Steve just saved me a callback. So, but it doesn't happen easily. You don't just sort of write a memo and everybody starts to fall in line. It goes with steady, consistent motivation from you. You have to be the source, but that you're not the one that delivers it. Everybody delivers it. So maybe here's a time to think about putting this in a little bit of a framework around this. So I've talked a lot about getting everybody to participate. You want an organization that's oriented to continuous improvement. So you have to think about this as a never-ending task. You're not looking for that one or two things you're going to do today and everybody's going, wow, that worked great, we're done. You're always coming up with new things, achieving some measure of success and moving on to something else that's new. You're always just putting one brick at a time in your customer satisfaction wall. So you need to, especially at this stage, you need to sort of pick some achievable targets. And there are a few things you can do. And if we had a group discussion about it and said, what do you think are some of the habits that would be good to change? They don't necessarily have to be directly visible to your client. They don't have to necessarily have a direct impact on the quality of the work you do. Sometimes it's just, it affects the job site. And when the job site is in better shape, people do their job better. And a favorite one that usually comes up very quickly is general housekeeping. How well is the place maintained? There's a house going up across the road from me, and I wasn't at all happy with the process that they went through to put the house up. But as I watched the thing go up, there's only one sort of impression that I've developed over the course of things, and that is this builder keeps a real good job site. This builder keeps things neat and tidy. And as a result of that, I'm not sure whether I'm right or not, but as a result of that, I look at it and go, yeah, and he seems to know what he's doing. But for no other reason than the job site is well kept. There's no garbage lying around, and any of the offcuts and things like that are stacked and put away. Everything's in the backyard that I can't see when I go by there. Everything's stacked appropriately. There's always access to whatever part of the job people need to get to. That's all I know from looking at it. But my attitude towards the builder has changed. And so you get that paying attention to some details, whatever the direct reason is, there's also a lot of indirect things that result. A well-kept job site. Another favorite is coffee cups. It drives me insane to see coffee cups lying around on a job site. It tells me that people don't respect the home they're building. B, it suggests that people are loafing on this job, because there's only one place that you should be having coffee cups, and that's wherever breaks are taken. And so I don't want coffee cups around the job site. Cigarette butts, even worse. So these are not things that you might look upon and say those are directly related to the quality of the customer experience, but indirectly they are. And the knock-on effect is then people start paying attention to the general appearance of the job. And
Steve, on those two things like standard coffee cups and cigarette butts, if you start dictating all those terms to the trade people, you will have a hard time working with them.
well, it depends. You never know until you try. And
Okay.
you have to set reasonable expectations. And I don't think it's unreasonable to tell people that they don't smoke while they're working over top of a work area. You just make it part of your health and safety policy. There's not too many places while a home is under construction where smoking doesn't incur a fire hazard.
That's in theory, yes.
Pardon me?
I said in theory, yes. In practice, maybe.
Well, you just and I know we're in an environment now where the subs are basically in the driver's seat.
100%. That's what I was getting with.
You can't really fire a sub for anything, no matter, never mind smoking. You can't fire them for not doing the job right, because there isn't somebody else to pick up the slack. But there are things you can do that make you a more attractive contractor to work for. If you can pay your subs, don't make them wait the 35 days that you're allowed to make them wait. Pay them promptly, and make it conditional. You say, here's my scorecard for when people get paid within a week, and you can make cigarette butts one of it. Maybe you can't stop the cigarette butts, but they don't get paid until 35 days then. I mean, there are things you can do that make yourself a more attractive builder to work for, and then make those benefits conditional on them doing some things to help you. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and it isn't all about thumping people over the head. You have, like I said, you have to have tool talks, you have to have safety talks, and in part of that safety talk, you try and drive home the things. And if cigarettes don't work for you, then find something else. The part of the reason is to have something to work at, something that keeps your your ambition of a high quality business in their line of sight. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, you don't write a memo and then magically people stop smoking or people stop drinking coffee. But you need to set it up in baby steps so that when people start to see progress, they start to get on board. So if you're going to initiate something like that, then you want A, how am I going to measure it? And B, how am I going to report it back to people? And, you know, if you can't get people to keep coffee cups out of the house, then, you know, at what point is it okay to drink coffee on the job site? Well, right now, that should be a COVID protocol. So dress it up that way. Here's your opportunity. No smoking, no coffee cups, because while you're working on the job, you should have a mask on. And by definition, you can't have coffee or a cigarette with a mask on. So bang, done. But I can't tell you what is or isn't possible with the people that you have to deal with. But, you know, fish around for something. Like I said, the point is less about achieving the things that I say you should achieve. It's more about showing that there's something that matters to you, you're tracking it, and you're reporting on the progress. Getting people on board to make the effort probably matters the most. This slide is perhaps a little bit out of place because we're shifting back to the dialogue you have with your clients. But something that I find kind of interesting when you talk to a home buyer or the customer for a contractor, and if you were to go and have a conversation with the contractor, you would hear some interesting things. The buyer, it probably doesn't surprise you to hear that if a buyer told you their top 5, the things that matter most to them during the course of a project, what's going to, at the end of the project, what is going to come across to them as the best indicators of success? Well, in no particular order, quality of the build, no surprise, people are concerned about the quality. Now, some people will say on budget, but I'm saying once the project has started, the budget has been established. People will say price, and I'd be careful about letting price be the dictator. But if you actually walk somebody through it, I say, I want the lowest price. I deny that. I deny that in almost 100% of cases. I don't think buyers are looking for the lowest price. And the reason I say that is I cannot imagine anybody showing off their new house and bragging it's the lowest price I could possibly get. What they want to say, although they might not phrase it that way, is it's the best value I could possibly get. So when it comes to the project actually underway, what they're concerned with is it on budget. Whatever the price is you've already agreed to, that's fixed. Now, the question that determines whether the project's going smoothly or not, is it on budget? Third is it on schedule? Am I going to get the house on time? Then they go to, is there a shared urgency when you have an issue? Does the contractor get right on it and respond to me? And minimal callbacks. Well, you don't know that until you've been living in the place for a while. So at the time somebody takes the house on, the things they'll reflect on the most was, is it the quality I was expecting? Is it the budget I was expecting? And did I get it on time? Now, if you look at things through the eyes of the contractor, what are the 3 things that mean most to them? Did I turn it over intact? How many callbacks did I have to have? Because the last thing I want to do once I've given somebody a house is to have to go back to it. Well, that translates into quality. Did I build it right the first time? Because if I didn't, then I didn't build it in the most economical way. So another thing to write down is the lowest cost way to deliver customer satisfaction is to get it right the first time. The lowest cost way to deliver customer satisfaction is get it right the first time, which translates into quality. It's in my best interest as a builder to build it right. Now, there's one where the client might push you and you say, it's also in my best interest to build it on budget. The client says, oh no, you're either looking for ways to cut costs, or you're looking, what that concerns them even more is you're looking for ways to build in additionals, to talk me into doing something more, to make the project expand. And if you can explain to them that usually additionals are not very attractive to builders. I've got a scope, I want to build that scope. We started out, the house was going to have a 2-car garage. And now it's going to be a 3-car garage. Guess what? As a builder, that really doesn't benefit me very much. Because now we've had to go back to get the permits redone. The additional price I can charge for that, for the extra garage, barely covers the cost and the schedule disruption and recalculating all my material takeoffs and things like that. A lot of builders will acknowledge that they really don't find additionals at all attractive. They would rather get the scope right. There, by all means, if somebody wants to modify the scope and change it and make it bigger or grander, that's fine. But once the project's underway and I've ordered all the materials and I've scheduled my trades and we've got the permit, I want to build what we agreed to build, because if you want to change it significantly, that's not really in my best interest. So if you are concerned that I'm going to try and talk you into growing a $500,000 project into a $600,000 project, it doesn't really do me very much good. So I'm not going to do that. And then on schedule, apart from some builders who seem to lose track of the schedule, for the most part, the best thing for your business is to get a project built in time that you expect to do it. You don't benefit from letting a house that's 2/3 finished sit there for a month while you run off to do another project. That disrupts all your trades and all your timetabling, and then now the lumber's sitting out in the yard getting rained on and warping. The best thing for you is to get it built on schedule. So the point here is, it's not a bad idea to have a conversation with the buyer so they get some reassurance that you're motivated to do what's best for them, because for different reasons, it's best for you as well. So they don't have to so much worry about, are you doing these things because I'm looking over your shoulder? And then maybe they can go away and go, no, he's going to do those things because it's the best way for him to run his business. The best way for most builders to run their business is to get it right the first time, to build it within the budget that was agreed to, and to build it on the schedule that was agreed to. Different reasons, but it's the same objective. So let's talk a little bit about the what happens when you go over and above, because a lot of builders do that. And this is another example that goes in a somewhat different direction. Another example of, you have to see the world through your client's eyes, because you may miss opportunities if you don't. You know, it's moving into the distant past, but I think it was 2018. We had rain every day in April. And I remember it because a lot of people that were going to come to the course, they couldn't because of April. The rest of the year was all jammed up while they tried to catch up on their build project. Rain every day in April, and essentially 0 foundations were poured in April. Well, April happens to be the month when most people would prefer to pour their foundations, so that they have the full summer to get through to close up. Now, a lot of builders that year, they essentially lost the whole month of April. But they were able to claw it back. Again, going back to the previous slide, the best thing for them is in their business is to try and stay on schedule. So they were able to claw it back, get back on schedule, And so a home that was promised for delivery in October, let's say, those people actually got the home in October. Now, there may have been a missed opportunity there. If I'm a builder who lost a month and yet still managed to hit my delivery date, I should explain to my home buyer what I did in order to get there. Yeah, you may remember in April, we had such a wet April, and you were probably kind of worried, but in May that the house was falling behind because we didn't get the foundation poured. But here we are. Here's your home on time as planned. It wasn't easy. We had to put in a little overtime. We had to be extra careful about getting everybody in on time. I had to show up and manage this job more often than I would normally. We did a lot of things, but I don't know if you realize it, but clawing back 4 weeks on that we lost on a schedule and managing to still deliver the home on time, that was a bit of a challenge, but we did it because that's important to us. Now, your homeowner, if you don't explain that to them, they're not going to be aware of that. They're not going to be aware that you did something pretty spectacular. And sometimes it can even go so far as to be, they see it in an entirely different light. So my examples tend not to be in the construction world, but I'll give you another example of this. So a few years ago, we went on a ski trip with another family, and it was in the Rockies. So when we're flying home, we come back to the Calgary airport, and we arrive at 10:30 for a 12:30 flight. And the airline says, fine, your flight's delayed, go away and come back at 12:30 for a 2:30 flight. Oh, and Peter, I don't know who Peter is, but Peter's going on a red eye. So they decided for us that Peter, which was the son from the other family, he was flying home. He's 15 years old and he's flying home overnight. He's going to get on a plane at 11 and land at 6 the next morning. So that's the degree, that's what we heard. So you can imagine we weren't too thrilled at that point. Just go away and come back when we tell you to. Then things got really annoying when we got on the plane as planned. We landed in Toronto. By this time, it's about 10 o'clock at night, which, you know, goes with, that's just the way it is. And ourselves and probably another 100 people from that flight went over to collect our skis. They came out where the oversized baggage does. And we're all milling around, wondering whether these skis are going to come out. In about half an hour of waiting, it was somebody, not an airline employee. It was an airport security person came by and said, folks, if you're waiting for skis, I don't think they're coming out tonight because there's none back there. And so everybody, I guarantee you, everybody went home that night saying, I don't intend to ever fly on that airline again. Like, we were really annoyed. It was, to all of us, it looked like the worst, most indifferent, careless kind of attention to service that we'd ever seen. So I don't know how I found this out. I can't remember, but I doubt if everybody came to realize this. But in fact, that airline had actually worked a piece of magic. And it really distresses me that probably somebody in that airline was up all night trying to work this kind of magic. And far from being given credit for it or congratulated for it, they played it out in a way that actually annoyed everybody who flew home from Calgary that day. So here's what happened. There had been an ice storm in Eastern North America the day before, and it stopped all flights coming west from probably 3/4 of the airports east of the Great Lakes. And the consequence was the plane that would normally have been used to take us back that day wasn't there. It was grounded somewhere in the east. So the message we should have got when we came to get on that plane was, we're sorry, folks, your flight's been delayed 2 hours. And the reason is there was an ice storm and it's almost impossible to get any planes now because they're all grounded. Clearly not their fault. Oh, by the way, we pulled out a bit of a magic trick and we've got a plane. So you aren't going to be stuck in Calgary overnight like some people will be. You get to go home tonight. The only thing you have to be prepared for is your flight's going to be delayed, and we can't get your skis on that plane for whatever reason. We didn't need a reason. So if that's what they'd said when we'd gone to check in, we'd all have been gone off to lunch going, wow, sounds like we dodged a bullet. We could have been stuck here for another night. We all have to be at work tomorrow. So instead of it being, boy, that airline really pulled out a magic trick. And instead of the dispatcher or whoever it was that managed to get that plane being congratulated, it was, they simply don't care. So you need to be careful that when you do something that's over and above, it's not a bad idea to explain to your client that we went over and above. Because I promise you, for the most part, they don't have the technical knowledge to spot it. You lose the month of April and you can't pour a foundation. There's very few people who understand the consequences of that. And so it's not a bad idea to explain it to them. Now, we talked about how it requires the whole organization. I touched on it and I said you need to get other people involved. You need to work on changing habits. But it's more than just that. You need people to feel as if they're part of the solution. Get people to check their work on things like housekeeping that are fairly low impact, work on things like dress and behavior. You know, people, a subtrade who says, I don't care what you want. If I want to wear ragged shirts to work, that's what I'm going to do. Then I'd start to wonder whether that subtrade really cares about the work they do. If they're not prepared to meet you that far in the middle, I would start looking for another subtrade. I know that's easier said than done, but you can't let them just do whatever they want in whatever way they want, because that will translate into the way they do the work as well. So everybody needs to be at least engaged. You need to make an effort to let everybody know that they're part of the broader objective of delivering satisfaction to the customers. It doesn't take a great leap of intuition to realize we all earn our living that way. And does this extend to the person who answers the phone in your office? Well, of course it does. Somebody who sounds disinterested whenever somebody calls in is going to leave a shockingly bad impression on the person calling. And somebody who does a good job, and the thing that I love it when somebody answers a phone and they consider their job to be something more than simply redirecting your call. Occasionally you come across somebody who answers the phone and they see their job as helping you get an answer. And I remember 20 years later, I remember specific phone calls that I've made. You get somebody on a switchboard calling a big corporation and you really don't know where to start. Here's my question. It's not very typical. Oh, well, let's see what we can find out. I'll give you the exact example. I phoned in. I wanted to buy something that normally is just a consumer product, and I wanted to inquire about getting it private labeled as a promotional item for my business. It wasn't a big enough number to really maybe get their attention, but I called in. I had no idea who to talk to, but I get a receptionist. As it happens, the reception was in Montreal. I said, here's what I'm trying to find out. And they said, instead of just bouncing me to someone and say, oh, here, ask these person, they said, hang on, I'll see if I can find out who you should talk to. Gone for about 30 seconds, came back and said, here's the name of the person you should talk to about that. This person is in New York today. I'm going to call down there and see if I can get them on the phone for you. And so now she calls New York, and so is not available, or for whatever reason, that's not really the story. She comes back and says, okay, well, he's not there. He's not there. So why don't you give me your question? I will put it through to him, but I will also put you through to their voicemail and they can call you back. So frankly, I can't remember whether I found out what I wanted to or not. I was just impressed that here's somebody who's, some people would think their job was to answer the phone and redirect the call. No, she sees her job as to answer the phone and see what they can help you with. Can your reception person contribute to the quality of customer experience? Sure they can. Everybody can. So you need to make them feel as if they can. So so this is an expression that some people seem to struggle with. I'm not sure if it's the way I communicate it. Everybody contributes to delivering customer service, customer satisfaction, okay? Underline delivering. One person measures or monitors customer satisfaction. And that's maybe an oversimplification, but if you're going to make an effort to advance your quality standards or your customer satisfaction levels, you have to have a way of measuring it. You have to, you need to find out, how am I doing to start with? Then you need to identify, what do I track as a reflection of that? And then somebody has to take the trouble to track it, because if you just sort of say, here's a new rule, we're going to do this, 6 months later, you frankly won't know whether you have or not, because nobody's taken the trouble to measure it and record it. And people won't do it individually, nor should they, because you need that information gathered in one place. So somebody needs to be the sort of the person who maintains your record keeping. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take something that, while those of you might say I can't do it under the terms that I do business, for me, I don't want to see coffee cups. In the industry I came from, coffee cups are a mark of death. Because of a home, we weren't working on new construction, we were working in people's houses. And if a homeowner comes into the house and sees a coffee cup left in their home, it's a huge sign of disrespect. So how do we do that? Well, we have a little campaign where somebody just does spot checks. Somebody goes out to jobs after the crews had left, or maybe partway through the day, random checks, and just walks through and quietly logs how many coffee cups they see. You want to guess at how many weeks it was before we could stop people leaving coffee cups around? It would be less than one. Because for an awful lot of things, if it's easy to do, then people would do it, as long as they believe you're paying attention. And it has nothing to do with punishment or reward. It simply says we care and we're keeping track of it. So the report from week 1 is, I went to 6 job sites and I saw a total of 15 coffee cups on 5 of those job sites. And then week 2 rolls around and I went to 7 job sites. I saw 1 coffee cup. And in week 3, I went to 5 job sites and I saw 0 coffee cups. And quite literally, because it's not that big a deal. And in the case of that situation, it's pretty easy for people to actually recognize that, yeah, that's a very discourteous thing to do. And as long as somebody's paying attention, I guess I will take the tiny little effort it takes to not do it. But it would never have happened if I hadn't got somebody to actually go and record it. So when you're going to have an initiative, then give it a target and get somebody to record it. And everybody needs to participate. Don't believe for a minute that if you're the only person in the company who really pays attention to how customers feel, that you're going to make a whole lot of headway. All that's going to do is cause you to be running around fighting fires all the time. The one person I'd come back to for a whole host of different things, because he does so many things well and so many things poorly, or he simply refuses to change. And one of the things he refuses to change is to acknowledge that everybody in his business contributes to his customer satisfaction. He believes customer satisfaction comes only from direct contact with customers. He refuses to introduce his workers to his customers. He wants the customers to see him and only him as the person that makes them happy. And in the next breath, he complains about how his life is going down the drain because he's doing nothing but running around holding hands of demanding customers. Because it doesn't draw on anything that his other people can do for him. And he doesn't give those people any credit for the things they do for him. People love his work. He likes to think they love him, but that's not it. They love his work. And one of the reasons they love his work is because he's got his own people doing that work, and they're the same people year in and year out, and they do a good job. But in the ensuing years, those people have left. They don't work for him anymore because he's the only guy who seems to care about the quality of the work, and people don't like to work in that atmosphere. I've already talked about how it's a good idea for one person to be the one who delivers or who keeps track of customer satisfaction. And we're going to go now to an example of what I think is something any contractor, any home builder can do. So up to now, this has been a lot of it's been very theoretical, and I say think about this and think about that. So if you want an action plan, let's talk a little bit about an action plan. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. This slide just says, let's accept the fact that bad news is hard to deal with. It's the kind of mindset that if you don't attack it, leads, if you go all the way back to one of those early slides about the 4 levels of customer satisfaction you deliver, and the first level is once something finally gets through to me, I jump on it. I'm great at customer service because I deal with it as quickly as I can. What often goes along with that is I don't actually make myself that easy to get in contact with. I'll get on something quickly, but it's hard for it to get through to me. I cringe at one of a VP I had early in my career. We were doing something that we knew was going to be unpopular, and he said something that made me cringe even then. He said, "Don't worry about it. You're high enough up the organization that you won't get that much blowback from it." And I thought, I'm in trouble working in this place. An organization where people are actually encouraged to insulate themselves from what's going on in the real world. That's not the sort of place I feel very comfortable about. But that's the way a lot of people are. Once something finally gets through to me, I'll get right on it. But I'm going to have all kinds of layers that prevent that from happening. You got to turn it around. You got to say, I don't want things to be hard to get to me. In fact, I need to actively go out. I need an organization that actively goes out and looks for the bad news. Because if we don't find it, it means our customer is going to find it. And if our customer brings it to us, we've lost. We've lost control of the timetable. The whole problem has to be interpreted the way they want to interpret it. So bad news has to be something it's out there. Not knowing about it is a bad thing. Knowing about it isn't great, but it's a whole lot better than the alternative. Okay, I don't think I need to beat this one up anymore. You need to solicit everybody and get them involved. So I said we talk about a sort of a bit of a actual routine. What can any contractor, any builder do to actually make a dent in their quality of service? So it's a 4-step thing. Use your pre-delivery inspection for a lot more than perhaps you are right now. Organize yourself so that warranty support happens automatically. Set your own bar. What we mean by that is don't let the statutory warranty determine, because if all you do is meet your statutory warranty, then all you guaranteed is that you're performing at about the same level as the worst of the licensed builders. Now, granted, there's all kinds of unlicensed builders who do worse than that, but why would you want to meet the minimum standard? So decide where you're prepared to exceed that, and we'll see all kinds of opportunities to do that tomorrow when we understand what that minimum standard is, and then state it. We will do better. and then follow up. If you're going to make a commitment to something, then you need to go the next step. And this comes back to that person who's keeping track. If you simply hand out a bunch of deficiencies and say, let's make sure we get these things taken care of, they won't. You need somebody who's following it up. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail. Use your pre-delivery inspection for all it's worth. That Terrian has their own sort of guidelines for how you carry that out, but do make it you want it to be an opportunity to showcase the house that you've built. But more than that, you want to come at it from the standpoint that if there's going to be something there, if you're going to discover a deficiency, you want to hear about it now, because it's only going to come up later anyways. And if you hear about it now, typically a pre-delivery inspection happens a week or two before the actual handover, which means you still control the job site for a little while, and you can get people in and out of there at a time that suits you best. You don't need to try and timetable around the family. The odds are in the last week or two, you've got people showing up on the job anyways, so it doesn't need to be a dedicated trip for some of those things. So there's all kinds of good reasons why, if it's going to get reported anyways in the first year, because that's when people can report any deficiency, might as well have it come up now. And yes, there may be instances where you disagree with the buyer about whether it's your obligation or not. But at least in many cases, you document the status of the place, and doing a video while you're going through it is not a bad idea, and encourage the buyer to do their own video if they don't want to just take a copy of what you're doing. Because that gives you a baseline that says, here's the condition that it was handed over. But there's a lot of information to help you improve that goes along there, but you have to use it. So what I would encourage you to do is get that PDI as detailed as you can make it, and then copy it, get it moved into a common database. Let's just call it what it is, an Excel spreadsheet. Now here again is where you want that one person who's handling the documentation of your customer satisfaction. That person, and it may be multiple people, but you want jobs specifically identified to somebody. So somebody takes that pre-delivery inspection, and they enter it into your database. Now how you categorize things is up to you. Some of my I keep track according to what are plumbing problems, what are finishing problems, what are building envelope problems, whatever it is, I categorize them, and I list them. So now I've got house 1, house 2, 5 years out, I've got 15 houses at the rate of 3 houses a year. I now have information from 15 different pre-delivery inspections. And you don't have to wait that long, it can happen right away. What can I use that for? Well, first off is, remember, if you want to improve, you set a bar, you have a way of measuring it, and then you report against that. So one of the things we say is, how many total deficiencies do we see on a typical pre-delivery inspection? Well, hopefully, as people start to pay more attention to the quality of the work they do, we start out, house number 1 in year 1 has 65 deficiencies on it. But as we move forward, by 3 years out, we're now seeing that a typical pre-delivery inspection has only 20 deficiencies on it. I'm not sure you'll ever get to 0, you might. But now you have progress, and you can report back to people and see all that effort is paying off. Now we have all these things. And every time you catch something, remember I said every time you catch something, instead of it having to be the home buyer, put $200 in your pocket. Well, you can congratulate your people and say, look, every time we catch something on a pre-delivery inspection and get it fixed, it's to our benefit. You now have data that you can communicate to people and say, here's how our efforts at improving have progressed. How do you find that out? You find it out by logging it on your pre-delivery inspection. The other thing that person can do for you is they can look for patterns. They can say, well, you know what, we now have 15 PDIs on here, and typically on a house, we're seeing 3/4 of the issues coming from plumbing. Oh, okay, well, maybe now we put some attention, we focus on plumbing and getting things right. So use it as a source of information that can be really useful to you. And then organize for warranty support. Well, here I'm going to throw a bit of a hand grenade at you, because usually when I mention this, there's more than one person who goes, "Are you nuts?" But here's what I would do if I was running a building business. I would promise everybody who bought a house from me that I would do a service call, a complimentary service call once a year for as long as they own that house. To which a lot of people go, "Are you crazy? Do you have any idea what you're getting yourself into?" And I say, well, let's look at that for a bit. And we go through building up a budget of what it would take to have somebody make a service call on once a year on the 30 houses that I built over the last, let's say, 10 years. And we look at, okay, so that's going to require a service technician at, let's say, $40 an hour, and that service call is going to be 4 hours. So that's $160. And they're going to need a vehicle. So we'll throw in $50 based on half a day for vehicle cost of $100 a day, which is pretty rich. Then we have to allow for, well, we'll build in some overhead costs on that. So we'll add another 50%. So we now have 210 plus 50, let's call it $260 as our cost per service call. Then we have to have an allowance for supplies and materials. So let's throw another $300 on that. So now we're at $560. And by the time we build all this up and we say, okay, occasionally they're going to be asked to do something, we give them a little bit of leeway to do work that isn't, strictly speaking, our obligation. So we'll build in a little bit more. And eventually we come up to the average cost per service call is about $800. Sounds like a pretty rich budget. And we're doing that times 30 houses. So we're incurring a $24,000 a year cost to make these service calls. Can we justify that? Well, first of all, let's see what we get from those as purely as service calls. That's 10 years of history. So out of 7 of those years, those homes are still under warranty. So my technician is going out there, quite possibly identifying warranty items before the homeowner does and fixing them before they become an issue at very little marginal cost to me, because they're there anyways. They go and sometimes they do things that are purely preventive, not strictly speaking our obligation, but purely preventive. One of the things that home buyers get tripped up on is it's their responsibility to maintain humidity in the home, but almost no home buyers have a clue about how to do that. They assume there's an automatic humidifier on the furnace, but if they know that much, they're in the minority. So my technician takes them through the house with a hygrometer, and they take humidity readings. Now I'm going to schedule these things probably in October or November and call them get ready for winter visits. And they're going to change the filters, not my obligation, but it certainly feels like value add to the customer. And if the filters weren't going to ever get changed, then it probably adds to the service life of the furnace. So I get a benefit from that. So there's a very good chance that simply getting out in front of repairs that would otherwise either be clearly my obligation or could lead to some form of dispute between me and the homeowner. Let's say you've got a homeowner who never replaces their furnace filters, and 5 years out the furnace fails. Do you think they're going to come at me? I think they are. They're going to say, I don't care what the warranty says, a 5-year service life on a furnace isn't sufficient, all because they didn't know enough to change the filters. So my technician goes out there, and at least they get changed once a year, checks the humidifier, make sure it's working. looks for condensation in the windows or something like that. Any number of things that are giveaways for humidity issues. Now, strictly speaking, maintaining humidity is the homeowner's obligation. But if it leads to something like mold, do you think I'm going to get dragged into that, into a knockdown, drag out fight? Sure, I will. So on that basis alone, I think I'm prepared to pay $24,000 a year just to get out in front of probably $30,000 or $40,000 worth of aggravation and repairs I'd be doing anyways. But that's not the real reason I'm going to do it. Remember, the value of a satisfied customer is that they become my salespeople. They're the ones that pass along referrals and encourage other people to do business with me. And so now, if I'm going to invest $25,000 a year in this service program, whether or not I can make that budget make sense on the repair part, it's not a service budget anyways. It's a sales budget. And these are service calls, but they're actually sales calls. They're me doing things to blow my customer away with how concerned I am for their well-being. And so now I have to ask myself, well, if that's the reason I'm doing it, what does it take in the terms of bringing me new sales to make it worth spending $25,000 a year? Well, there's a formula you can use to do that. And it will be, the numbers will be different from one company to the next. But if you are going to add additional overhead costs and you want to know how much must I sell in order to justify paying those additional overhead costs, the formula you can use is, what are those overhead costs divided by my gross margin percent? Now, if you don't know what gross margin percent is, that comes in a different course. But a typical gross margin percent for a builder might be 25 or 30%. So let's say it's 25%. So I'm going to incur $25,000. The break-even formula says that overhead cost divided by my gross margin percent. 25,000 divided by 0.25 is the same as 25%. And that, if you do the math, that comes out to $100,000. What that's telling me is if this program, 30 service calls, can turn up $100,000 a year in new business to me, then I'm actually better off incurring that cost. It means I'm going to do $100,000 of new business and earn 25% on that, or $25,000. Now, I'm in the business of selling houses, so I'm probably not looking at increments of $100,000. I'm probably looking at increments of $1 million. Now, each of those 30 people, they probably have contact with maybe 100, 200 other people over the course of a year. And what do you think the odds are that in those 200 conversations, somebody's in the process of looking to buy a house? Probably pretty good. So out of those 30 people, I think there's a strong likelihood that in any given year, a couple of those contacts are going to get in touch with me because they've heard what a good builder I am and what good care I take of people. And because they come to me with that kind of an endorsement, the odds that I'm going to be able to win those contracts or do business with those people is pretty high. It's a whole lot better than somebody who might call me because they saw my ad in a magazine or they saw my sign on somebody else's project. The people that call me from that direction are already prepared to think that I'm the greatest guy on the planet. So the chances that I am going to sell a house that I otherwise wouldn't have seen, in fact, that might be the only sales effort I have to put out. So I spend $25,000 a year to make those service calls. That's my sales budget. And if I only sold one house at $1 million in 10 years because of those service calls, remember, my break-even sales $100,000 a year, or otherwise $1 million every 10 years. All those 30 service calls a year have to do for me is help me sell one house in 10 years. And I've earned enough to pay the cost of running that service program for those 10 years. Now, quite apart from that, if I'm prepared to do this, does that set me apart and make me look pretty special to everybody I talk to? I'm talking to somebody who's thinking of buying a house or thinking of having the house built. And they're talking to me and I say, yeah, we're so sure of the quality of the houses we build. We come back every year and help you get ready for winter, because it's that important to us that you're happy with your home. Does that sound like a pretty compelling argument? Does it set me apart from all the other people who might be quoting on that job? Does it make me so attractive that somebody might actually be prepared to pay a little more because they want that kind of service? Kind of think it does. It helps me sell houses, helps me sell my company or the work my company does. So when I say organize for warranty support, don't treat warranty support as a hole in which you throw money. Warranty support is another opportunity for you to get out there and impress your clients with how well you take care of them, how seriously you're concerned for their enjoyment of the house they bought. And it's your opportunity to continue to have a relationship with them. That's the way you should look at it. Remember, the rest of the economy is desperate for an excuse to keep in touch with their clients. You kind of have it. Use it. And then when we say set your own bar, that will become more evident when we talk about what your actual warranty obligations are tomorrow. When it comes to specific things, it can sometimes seem like it's full of disconnects between what a buyer might want and what you as a builder are obliged to do. Let's not think so much about what actually counts as a defect. Let's think more about what your service levels are if it is a defect, because frankly, you're allowed way more time than I think you should be allowed. And so you should tighten up on that. And then follow up back again to that person who's keeping track. You've got all of those pre-delivery inspections that you've logged. Somebody should be going back and checking off. Did we get these things done? Because you know as well as I do, you end up making those notes and they ride around in your glove box in your pickup truck and you think, I'll get around to it when I get around to it. If it's you that's keeping track, let's be honest with ourselves, it won't get done. It needs to be somebody's job to maintain a log of here's all the callback obligations we've got. Here's when we're going to get them done, that you might give that person responsibility for scheduling people to get out there. And we got sign off. Some things, quite a few of those things, you need a formal signature from the client that says, yes, I'm satisfied this was dealt with. And you need somebody to keep track of what obligations do we still have, what have been done, which ones do we have sign off on. If you're looking for individuals to keep track of that, you won't have it. So somebody's got to follow up. How are we doing for time? I'm going to let you go in about 10 minutes. This is an exercise that we won't get into today. The point of this slide really is back to this notion of you have to have something to measure. And don't get hung up on necessarily, do you have to measure a discrete thing? Sometimes you can choose a broad directional measurement and it tells you a whole lot. For instance, when you hear that the unemployment rate is 6.6%, is there anyone in the country who calculates how many actual unemployed people there are? Maybe the people at EI do, but nobody actually looks at an unemployment rate and says, okay, that means this many people are unemployed. Most people, when they look at it, they go, okay, what is it relative to last month? What is it relative to last year? And over time, we've sort of developed a sense that if the unemployment rate is high, it suggests that the economy is weak. If the unemployment rate is low, it suggests the economy is strong. We don't necessarily have a direct link that says an unemployment rate of this means the economy is growing at such and such a percent. We just know that there's a loose correlation there. And that tells us something. In fact, it's one of the most important measurements we've got. And you can apply that same broad rationale to your business. One way that I might do it would be, I am going to, not only will I, for any of my projects, will I have an overall project schedule, I will try and schedule discrete portions of that project. So I might schedule the foundation work, the framing, the exterior finish, the interior finish, however I might want to break that down. And I might actually try and develop a scheduling process that tells me specifically how long that will span. Okay. That doesn't do me a whole lot of good unless I know how reliable my scheduling actually is. So I'm going to keep track. I took a guess, initially, I took a guess at what my timetable should be for each of those things. Now for each project, I am actually going to record what the actual was. So my schedule was 4 weeks to do the foundation. Actual was 19 days. So I did it in 1 day less. My schedule for the framing was for 22 days. My actual was for 25 days. So it took me a bit longer. And I keep track of that. And on one job, that might not tell me a whole lot. But as I start to build up a record, and I realize that typically I overestimate on my foundations by about 10% in terms of the time it takes. I underestimate on my framing by about 15% in terms of the time it takes. So now maybe I adjust my scheduling. And it might allow me to actually reduce the time it takes to build a house. I might be able to bring my whole schedule in. But what it also does is it lets me be more precise about telling my subs when I need them to show up on the job site. And do you think a sub appreciates a builder who can be more precise about when they're needed? I think they probably do. I say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask you to show up to do the framing on April 30th. And you can expect this to be a framing job that takes 3 weeks. And you can go ahead and schedule another job right after that. And I'm reliable. Do you think a framing subcontractor is going to like doing work for me because I can be precise? I think he probably will. So what I'm doing is I'm measuring something that seems like a very abstract kind of measurement, but it tells me a lot. It tells me about how tightly am I running my projects? How good is my information? How good is the information I can give to other people? And it probably helps me be more precise about when I turn the house over to the buyers. And the point here is not that I'm recommending that you go and measure your timelines on sub portions of the project. My point is, there are broad, very general measurements you can make that tell you pretty useful information about the mechanics of how you run your business. So give that some thought. What is the equivalent of the unemployment rate when it applies to your business? What's that broad directional measurement that I might want to keep track of that tells me how I'm doing? And there's nothing wrong with going back and talking to your clients after the fact. Quite apart from doing my annual service call, I'm probably going to do a review, an interview with any of my home buyers 6 months after they've moved in, and then maybe a year and a half after they've moved in. Can we hear from you? You might hear some things that aren't easy to hear, but that's what you want. Tell me what went wrong so I can stop doing it wrong. Because if you don't tell me, I never know it's there, and I continue to disappoint people. We make a statement that quality of customer satisfaction can both improve your cash flow and improve your profitability. probably in ways that more than compensate you for any costs that you might incur by trying to achieve those things. It can improve your cash flow by, if it allows you to get the job closed off and release a holdback faster, then that's good. Typically, a holdback represents 100% of the net profit you'll make on a place. If somebody's holding back 10%, which they're required to do, that's 100% of the profit you're likely to make. If you don't get your hands on that holdback, you built that house for nothing. And then why is it more profitable? Well, because back to the most economical way to get something built is to get it right the first time. Every time you have to do a callback, consider it $200 out of your pocket. Every time you catch a mistake before it gets through to the next stage of the project, put $200 back in your pocket. Which one of those two things would I rather do more of? And then as we've, I can't go through this without acknowledging that it's real easy for me to sit at a desk and say, do this and do this and do this. It's real hard when, as a lot of builders are drawn to the trade specifically because you see results quickly. Carpenters will often say the thing they love most about the job is they start with a stack of lumber in the morning, and by the end of the day, they can see what they built. But builders in general, I think, get a real charge out of the fact that they show up in April and it's a bare lawn, and by October there's a house with people living in it. There's a lot of satisfaction in it. It's driven by a character trait that says we like to get things done. And then we talk about these things about customer satisfaction, and the results are slow to appear. A lot of it requires constant, never-ending effort, and the results are hard to see. We don't have time, but there's an interesting video that sometimes I played to people, and the guy, he's a well-known man. I guess he's a management consultant named Simon Sinek, and some of the things I quite agree with him on, and some things I totally disagree with him on. But the one thing that caught me was a speech he gives where he says something. He starts right out by saying, when did you fall in love with your wife, if you're married, or your husband, or whoever you're in love with? When did you do it? Now, it's a rare person who said, I did it at this instant. Most people, it's just, well, somewhere along the line, we were in love. It's because that very big, huge achievement happened in steps that were so small that you almost didn't notice them. Or his other example is, which time in the last 6 months when you brushed your teeth did you prevent that cavity? You don't know. What you know is by brushing your teeth every day, you may well have prevented a cavity. So if you, for things like improving your quality orientation or your customer satisfaction, for these things that take a slow, steady effort, it's dispiriting, because you can't sort of get to the end of the day and see, that's what I did. If I'm a carpenter, I can get to the end of the day and say, well, got the roof on. But you can't get to the end of the day and say, we took our customer satisfaction up a notch today. Sometimes you can, but for the most part, it's only, you have to look back over the last 6 months and say, how are we doing relative to that? Again, that you won't be able to do that if you don't find something to measure and record it. So that brings us to the end of the first day. Tomorrow we will shift gears significantly. We will talk pretty much all about the licensing body, more about Terry and how you engage with them, what the rules are, and how you fulfill your warranty obligations. So I'll just stick around. If you have questions, we can talk about that. Otherwise, you're free to go. You can use the same link to sign on for tomorrow. And Zubair, I think I've just been ignoring that hand up. Is that the same hand you put up a while ago, or have you been patiently waiting to say something?
It just came just now.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad I didn't overlook you. Okay,
So I have a question. It's like we didn't study any of the statutory requirements which are from Talion. We're gonna study them tomorrow, right?
yes. Like I said, tomorrow is all about what the rules and regulations are to do with your warranty requirements and how you enroll and how you work with Terry and et cetera.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
anything else?
Didn't we have to do the like homework? There was some assignment you were mentioning.
No, what I said was if you wanted to read the manual before the course started, you feel free, but I said you probably don't have to. Most people find that they can just sit through the course, make notes, which is why I say you should print it out so you can keep notes and things on there. But no, we don't have specific homework assignments.
Steve, about the exam,
Yes,
you said it's all multiple choice, or is it
multiple choice and true and false.
multiple choice? And if I'm not wrong, it's open book, right?
That's right.
And most of the content will be somewhat related to what we are seeing today and tomorrow.
Oh, it should be. It should be all related.
No. What I meant was that since just one thing, like where I took the other courses, they had kind of a practice sessions where you go offline on the website and try some of the questions that you go through and practice, and those questions were kind of a link to the final exam in a certain way.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was a bit of a beneficial in terms of.
Well, yeah, we can see whether we can make a little bit of time just to pull up a couple of examples on the questions, just so you're familiar with how the format works.
Yeah.
I'm
sure you've been doing for a while. Was just more of a inquisitiveness in me trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, there's always room to improve on things. I know there's a couple of things on this exam that kind of some people find a bit frustrating. There are some questions on this exam that are what we call multiple answer. So there'll be a question. Most of them, there's a question, there's 5 possible answers, and you choose the one that you think is correct.
Most suitable, okay.
Some are true and false. Then there are a few others, not many, fewer than 10, where there's a question, there's 5 possible answers, and more than one of those will be correct, and you have to select all of the ones that are correct. So, there may be a question, and then 3 of the 5 answers are correct, and you have to identify all 3.
And number 2, I know HCRA is asking for transcripts nowadays. So
the way that works is you finish all of your courses, then open your application file with HCRA. They will then tell you to get the training organizations to send those transcripts directly to them.
No, I understand. So where I'm getting with this is that you got exam minimum is 75%. What happens if somebody doesn't pass in first attempt?
Well, the minimum is 70%.
Yeah, okay.
And if you don't pass, we have to report, if you fail, we have to report the failure to HCRA, but we'll let you take the exam a second time. So that
you have to report the failure too? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of new. They didn't used to require it. So what would happen is you do all of your exams, all of those results. Let's say I did all 7, and on 2 of them I failed the first time and I passed on the second time. Then the transcript that would go to HCRA would show all of those scores.
Okay.
So it would say for those 2 exams that I failed the first time, it would have to report, oh, we got 66 on this one and 65 on that one. And then on the second writing, he got 74 and 80 or something like that. They didn't used to require you reporting the failures, but they do now.
Sounds good.
Okay, you won't fail.
No, I know I haven't failed any, but I'm just Throwing it
Well,
out there.
I think one of the reasons they did that was because for people who've got experience, it makes a lot of sense to just, because you're allowed to take an exam. I think you have to do it through Algonquin College. You can just write the exam, and if you pass, you pass. And so I think what they wanted to know was how many people are just writing the exam to see if they can pass. And they want to hear about if there was a failure.
I see.
The exam that we
From-
take at Algonquin College is different from the exam we're gonna take here.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, each training organization does their own exam.
Uh,
Just so you know, guys, I've done a course with Steve before. And, you know, a lot of the time he's not reading through everything. So you might feel that, you know, you're not learning, but then when you get to the exam, you realize that you retained a lot more information than you thought you did from everything that he was talking about.
Yeah, no,
So,
Rich, I
this is
wasn't
good.
intending to that. I think he's doing a very good job. I have to say.
The other
I've
thing
taken
too
that-
is I don't know if I even, like the last test I did, I got an 88 on, and I don't think I might have looked through my book maybe 3 or 4 times. So just so you know.
Well, I guess my take on it is anybody can read. I don't need to read the slides for you.
I agree. No,
so-
that's true.
Now, what you will find, not so much for the stuff today, but what you will find tomorrow is it's more fact-based. It's more, here's what it is. Here's what they've said it must be. And so there will be elements where it's both good and bad. There will be times when the answer is right there on the slide. You just have to look it up and there's the answer.
No, Steve, one thing I really like about your slides is the commentary beside it.
Yeah,
There is a commentary beside each slide. And I
yeah,
really like that commentary.
yeah, like I said, anyone can read, so you need to get a little bit of background behind it. So anyways, I appreciate all of those comments, folks.
Steve, having said all that, you did, it's still recording. So I don't know if you.
Yes,
how you-
so it is, yeah, thank you. Otherwise, I'd fill my hard drive with 5 hours of this thing.
Yeah, I only need from